What is going on, guys? Welcome back to episode 3 of Bound to Improve. My name is Landon Eller.
And I'm Chris Pound. Jumping straight into things, the book we chose to read this week was Straight from the Gut by Jack Welch. Why did we choose this book to read? I can't quite remember if it was a class that Landon and I were in together, but one of my professors was telling me about the late and the great Jack Welch and his philosophies on management in general. And so just really being able to dive into his strategies of on how to manage people was a really nice insight.
Awesome. Yeah, but before we get into it, we'll hit on our implementation from last week. So mine was it was 3 things: to make people smile, to give them a compliment, and to remember their name and use the name over and over in the conversation. And I did end up talking to 5 new people that I've never talked to before, and it was interesting, their response. You could tell that it was so out of the norm. Like, one guy, his name was Andy, he even started laughing as I was walking away, and I just think it was so unexpected that it just brought about a strange response. And hopefully I ended up brightening their days a little bit, and I think that's definitely something I'll continue with in the future. Chris, how about you?
Yeah, absolutely. Mine was to really try, since the industry that I work in, I get to be face to face with people all the time. And so I wanted to try to really convey that, the sincerity behind the things that I was doing for the customers. And right away, you could tell that the customers were responding to that energy that you were giving them, and they were really giving it back to you. But on the flip side, you could also tell who was just trying to flatter you, and so that was kind of amusing to me. Is like you would tell someone, "I hope you have a great day," and they'd be like, "You too." Now that's flattering me. I don't think you were being sincere, but I'll take your welcome.
So going forward, do you think you will still practice this, use this as often as possible, or do you think it's just something that's going to go by the wayside?
No, I think you should really use it every day. And just for a quick instance here in the book, Jack says that meeting someone new is an interview, right? Every new person that you meet is an interview. And so if you take that mindset with everybody you meet, it's a constant interview. There are people who are judging you regardless. So why not make a good first impression?
Boom. I love that. That was way to tie us into the book already. You ready to hop into the book now?
Absolutely, yeah.
So the structure of this book was a little unorthodox. He kind of jumps around in terms of the years, but how we were going to structure it was we were just going to give a brief overview or synopsis of Jack's life and his career at GE, and then we were going to get into what we took away from the book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So first, Jack grew up in a small town in Salem, Massachusetts. He kind of lived. He was an only child. His mom was the center of his universe. She was the one that was always there for him and instilled a whole bunch of values into him. And his dad was a workaholic, and he loved what he did. So he was at home very much. And then Chris, do you want to touch on school, sports, etc.?
Yeah, so he at a young age he played a lot of different sports, but the thing that he kind of fell in love with was golf. And so what actually ended up happening was he became a caddy for this golf course at a super young age. And he just, in fact, he actually had a whole chapter at the very end of the book on why he feels like golf is important in the business world. And I always knew people said, like, if you're going to work in business, you should probably try to develop a golf game. And, it got to the point where he was playing like 90 holes a weekend. That's a lot of golf. That's like 6 hours of golf. I couldn't do that. And so, but with was it hockey and baseball, he felt like he was too short and too slow. And golf, you could kind of just teach yourself and go at your own pace. And one of his wives, the second wife, what was her name?
Jane.
Jane. Yes, Jane. He taught her how to golf. And so he kind of used golf to build their relationship, and I thought that was just kind of funny.
Yeah, then kind of diving back into like a good story from his mom was he played hockey in high school, and he felt like that was one of the sports that he was really good at, and he was a team captain, and they were having a rough year their senior year, and they ended up losing in overtime in one of the games, and Jack ended up throwing off his equipment, and he skated back into the locker room, and next thing you know, his mom slams open the door and grabs him by the jersey. He's like, "You punk! If you don't know how to lose, you'll never know how to win." And it was things like that that instilled in him his competitiveness, his self-confidence, and she also taught him independency. That was critical for his success at GE.
Yeah, kind of the reason I'm shaking my head right now is because that was actually like one of my quotes that I wanted to talk about later. But Landon talked about it. Yeah, right. If you don't know how to lose, you will never know how to win, and that's in everything in life. And so that was kind of what his mom was his rock, right? His mom was his foundation. It's about having a strong foundation, and his mom was hard on him, but it was always to make him better. And I actually saw a video this weekend saying, coaches don't play, right? A basketball coach doesn't go in the game. And so the kind of the relation to this story was, when it comes to parenting, you can coach, but you can't play. And so I thought that was it kind of just put two and two together on with the book and that video that I had in mind. And it was, coaches don't play, so don't play for your kids, right? Let your kids grow up, learn, make mistakes, and grow. So
that's a good way to put it. And continuing here with after high school, he ended up going to the University of Massachusetts to major in chemical engineering. Right away, he loved the environment. It was that he had the ability to play hard and work even harder. He was great in school, and his professors ended up convincing him to go to graduate school. So that is what he did. He went to the University of Illinois. And then after those years, when he completed that degree, he was interviewing around at multiple companies, but the job market wasn't too hot. So he decided to go back to school and get his PhD, which ultimately, after he accomplished this, he was interviewing with two companies, and one ended up being GE in Pittsfield.
Yeah, he actually ran into a little bit of trouble while getting his PhD, but that's, we're not going to be complete spoilers here, so you'll have to read that part. It was quite funny. But yeah, then he gets married to his first wife, Carolyn, and Landon mentioned the fact that like the years go back and forth, and they do, right? You'll get very, very long book, like 430 something pages long. And throughout the book, he would jump from like different scenarios and then go back to like 5 years earlier, where something of the same thing had kind of happened, and he would compare the two. And so I just thought that was kind of neat, seeing the comparison between what was happening in 75 compared to 84, right? And so how times have changed was a really big takeaway from that.
Yeah, awesome. And then, so when he went to the Fairfield, he joined the plastics business, and after a couple of years, he got fed up with the bureaucracy and ended up he was going to leave. But one of his managers decided, he convinced Jack to come back and said it's not going to be like that anymore. So just like that, snap of the fingers, Jack was always over delivering, trying to get out of that pile that most of the people at GE were stuck in because they just couldn't move or climb the corporate ladder. So from there, he quickly moved up the ranks. At 32, he became the youngest GM at GE. And then he became the vice president at GE at 36. And during this time, as his parents ended up dying, his family had a history of heart problems. His mom passed away, and that was a extreme detriment to him since she was always his rock. And then about 6 months later, his father passed away as well.
Mm-hmm. This is kind of when he started getting into like the next CEO talks, and one of the best stories within the story, I thought, was the airplane situation. Essentially what happened was, Reg had his coworker, or was it Reg who had the airplane? I think it was Reg who had the airplane story, wasn't it?
Yeah, and Reg, just for a little context, Reg was the current CEO.
Yeah. And so the question went something like this. It was like, me and you are on an airplane, a company airplane, and unfortunately the plane crashes. Who would you put as CEO? And, I just thought it was kind of comical because Jack tried to convince Reg that he would survive and that he'd place himself at CEO. And Landon made the comment the other day how, having the confidence, I'll say, to be able to say that I would put myself above these other people. I think that was like a huge part of Jack. He was just a super confident guy. He was comfortable in his own skin and he had nothing to lose.
Yeah, that different mindset almost to get to that next level and show you really got what it takes to run a global company like GE.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So go ahead.
From there, he ended up beating out 2 others who were in the final 3 of the race to become CEO. And the first kind of initiatives he took in the 1980s were all about tearing apart the bureaucracy, redefining the culture, rebuilding the foundation, putting people first, and he took under a variety of initiatives to make that happen.
Yeah, he really felt like there were way too many layers within the organization. People had to report to their boss, and then their boss had to report to another boss, and then another boss. And so his idea was, if you have an idea and you think it's a good idea, tell somebody and get it right up the chain. But in order to do that, he had to cut the ladder in half. And so that's kind of what set his management style apart from other people's. Was he actually made the statement that, people say that you should treat everybody the same, and he says you shouldn't. And he used a 20 win baseball pitcher and a 40 home run hitter. Look how they're paid, and then look how a bullpen catcher is paid, right? The people who perform and get things done and accomplish what they're set to do, they achieve more, they get paid more, they're rewarded better. And so he felt like, and he actually had like this bell curve where the top 10%, the middle 80%, 70, and then like the bottom 10. And he would fire the bottom 10. But he also made the point where when it comes to firing somebody, it shouldn't be a surprise. And I've never been fired, and I hope that I never be fired. But his thought was, if you're firing somebody and they are genuinely surprised that you are firing them, then what kind of manager were you? You should give these people the idea that, hey, like, I'm not really happy with how you're accomplishing things, work related. Let's try to do better. Give them a week to try to prove themselves. By the second meeting, if they haven't done it, give them another couple days. So by the time you get to that third meeting and you go to fire the person, it's not a surprise. And so that kind of takes the emotions out of it. And he thought that was like massive.
And then just to kind of add more color to that, communication was huge for him. He always felt that you have to let the person know where they stand. That communication is critical because you have to be able to put the people first. And just touching on the layers that you were mentioning before too, he used the analogy of wearing 4 sweaters and walking outside. When you have 4 sweaters on, you don't know how cold it is outside. Similarly to having all those layers, you don't know what's really going on at the bottom or going through the different layers of management and the different corporate ladder. You're just unaware of all those changes. And he referred to breaking down all these walls as boundaryless. And we'll touch on that here in a little bit, I believe. So moving on, he ended up accomplishing pretty much what he set out to do in the 80s by his strict management policies and kind of reinventing the wheel and how he treated people and how he developed people. But the 90s, he took on 4 key initiatives. And he believed initiatives were something that were long lasting and would impact the company for a long time coming. So the 4 were globalization, services, Six Sigma, and e-business.
Yeah, I guess I feel like this would be a great time to actually talk about like the A players and the 4 E's of GE leadership that he tried to instill into these CEOs. And he made it very clear to these CEOs that, you know, we may own you, this and that, but if you're the CEO of this business, you're the guy of this business, and I want you to act like you are the guy of this business. And so he felt like each business has A tier, B tier, and C tier. C tier being the 10%, the ones that didn't make it. But the A, he made the comment that with the A people, love them, hug them, kiss them, never lose them. They're too important. You can't lose that top 10% of performers. And he said that every A player has to have the 4 E's of GE leadership, which is very high energy, right? The ability to energize others. That was the second E, energized others. The high energy was the first one. The edge, the ability to make tough yes and no decisions. And then the last E, which was execute, right? Deliver on the promises that you are giving. But he also felt that the 4 E's were held together by 1 P, which was passion. You have to love what you're doing. Otherwise, there's no reason to be doing it at all. And so he really tried to instill that with everybody within the company, whether you are A, B, or C, or a janitor or a CEO. He wanted you to know where you stood, why you stood where you stood, and how to improve.
Yeah, that's a great explanation on that. Touching on the 4 kind of initiatives to go off, the leaders he put in there, he used them to carry out these initiatives. So the first one was globalization. In the 80s, he focused on becoming number 1 or number 2 in terms of market share in each business. Mm-hmm. And that was the only way of thinking. It wasn't until he started implementing the classes that he held in Crotonville to help develop these A players, and they would brainstorm ideas on how to keep building the company, taking it from 0 from what it was doing and building it to another 1. So one of these ideas was to expand out of your normal businesses, not just be number 1 and number 2, take on new growth initiatives. So that's what they were trying to do there with globalization. The services aspect of it was almost all of their business came from products. And there was a huge potential for an untapped market in terms of services. And by the end of it, they were focusing more on fixing the products they've already put out in terms of services than they were producing new products. And I think that opened up a whole nother revenue stream for them. Then, Chris, I don't know if you want to touch on Six Sigma or e-business.
Yeah, he Six Sigma really really dramatized how much more money they could be making if they were more efficient and they had higher quality products. Like we're talking like going from a few $100 million to like $1 billion, like in revenue, which is astronomical, especially at like the time when you could say GE was the largest business in the world. And really understand how big they were. When you hear General Electric, you're thinking, at least I thought originally, electric. Maybe they produce power. I was completely wrong. They were in literally everything, from lights, plastics, appliances, everything. Even had a financial firm or two, because I guess you could say GE Capital was one. And then they had that whole little scandal when the guy kind of lost $350 million out of nowhere. But going on to the e-business, that's when the computers really started to come out. And Jack was completely against having computers. And then him and his wife were on a trip, and she is glued to this thing. And Jack disappears like halfway through like dinner or something. And his wife catches him in the room on the computer looking up news about GE stock and the company in general. Just like, what's going on? What is Jack Welch doing right now? And that's when he got hooked. I will save my next comments after Landon kind of hits on those where he wants to. But there's a lot that was pretty deep. I felt like the whole side of the e-business was a whole untapped market that he was able to take advantage of and really flourish.
Yeah, it was truly new. No one had ever experienced it before. So they broke it down into like 3 categories: the sell, the buy, and the make. Obviously, the buy is what products they bought to install in their other products or make new ones. The sell is obviously the ability to sell their products online in a different marketplace. And both of those increased revenue, but he felt like where the real value came from was in the make. And he described what he called scud works. And what scud works were the people who sat in the back office and had heaps of papers, just piling up costs that were completely unnecessary to the business. What the make allowed GE and other businesses to do was to put all those papers and unnecessary expenses into processes and systems within the computer appliances. And he felt like that kind of saved and generated the most wealth, I guess, from the internet phase.
Yeah, almost like the best returns possible.
Yeah.
I think this is probably a great place to go into our main takeaways from the book, wouldn't you say?
Heck yeah. You want to kick us off, or you want me to?
I mean, I can. One of the big things he talked about was having a mentor. He had a mentor, and so which was Reg, who was the prior CEO before him, and he really loved their relationship that they had. And when computers came out, and he wanted to get computers in GE, most of the people didn't know how to use them. And so that's when he called on a secretary to try to teach him how to use a computer. And then he actually went as far to make it a point where everybody in the business has to have a mentor. And so you would see these top level executives who are 45, 50 years old go down to these 25-year-olds who understand how to use the technology, and they would teach these older people how to use the computers, and this is kind of really what took off on. This is the reason their econ business really took off in the first place, I would say.
Yeah, and he even had a mentor program in place, and this was going back to that developing people. He took the high business leaders and gave them mentees, and their job was to basically instill in them the GE values and the different type of mindset that he required to be a part of this business. And if they couldn't do that, then to go find someone who could take on those GE values and take on that growth mindset. And moving on to the next point here is he talks a lot about in this book luck, and he mentions at a certain point it's the luck of the draw in life. But one of the quotes he also said in the book was, God will parachute you to, God controls like the parachute and where you land. but you have control of where you jump out of the plane at. So you have to be able to have your ducks in a line, and that's what Jack was able to do. He says he was lucky, but he worked his butt off to make sure he had all of his ducks in the row. So when he left it up to luck, he had a pretty good chance of being successful.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess another one of my biggest takeaways was the whole culture side of the business. As a college student myself, I've heard the term culture within a business, or the statement culture within a business, and I have no idea what that means at the time. And looking back on that now, I understand why I didn't know what it meant. One, because I'd never been in a business where culture was important. Currently, the place where I work, culture is essentially shoved down your throat to an extent, right? Everybody has to have the same principles and the same values. If you don't, you're gonna both businesses are gonna struggle if they're not on the same page, and that really starts with culture.
Yeah, and a key part of that culture was having the right people in place. And one of the main learnings that Jack took away from his time as CEO is it doesn't matter where they come from. You can't just take it off their resume and know that they're going to be a good candidate, because in the end, that doesn't matter. Some other points that he made around people was you have to get the horses in the right place fast and remove all the resistors, because that's not going to make any change, and they're just going to keep resisting. So you might as well take the people who can do the job and will do it well and put them in place as soon as possible.
This is where I draw the connection between 0 to 1 and straight from the gut. And 0 to 1 is talking about having a strong foundation, right? The foundation is where you build on top of. 0 to 1 did a great job explaining that concept. Jack Welch just watered the seed, right? And now we're Jack and the Beanstalk, baby. And so in my head, I'm going, wow, this is crazy.
Yeah, he was all about people first, and then strategy and everything else second.
Mm-hmm.
And just the last point I have here on people is you have to be able to put yourself in a place where you meet and engage with the people that have similar aspirations, similar goals, similar mindset as you. For example, his first wife, Carolyn, she was always there for him in his ups and downs, and she was like his stronghold at home. And other areas where he had good friendships was in his leadership team. He trusted everybody. He knew they did good work, and you could see that constantly throughout the book. He was always name dropping people and highlighting their good attributes and giving them compliments.
Yeah, absolutely. I think from my standpoint, I've kind of touched on my biggest takeaways. So, Landon, if you want to go into like one or two more of yours.
Yeah, and another one of my biggest takeaways is there's an art and a science to everything. You have to be able to elaborate things in simple terms. And I'll give you a story that there was from the book. So there was one time Jack was having his annual reviews with various business units, and the one he was at was an insurance company. So Jack, never being an insurance guy, asked him a simple question: the difference between one type of insurance and another. And the guy fumbled through his answer, took way too long, and then at the end just ended up getting frustrated and said, how do you expect me to explain something in 5 minutes that took me 25 years to learn? So the ability, he knew the science, most likely. He was in the weeds. He knew the details. You have to be able to take that science, take those details in your head, dramatize your ideas, and be able to explain them to others so they get it and they understand it. And that is the art that needs to take place in business, in your relationships, etc.
Yeah, really dumb it down. Know your audience, right? If someone's trying to teach me a new concept that they've gone to they've got a whole major in, don't expect me to be able to pick that up like that, right? Use layman's terms. Make my life easier for me and for yourself, so we don't both have to sit here for 45 minutes on one subject of the entire topic, and I still won't get at the end of the conversation. Dumb it down for me, right? I'll let you be the teacher. Doesn't matter to me. Help me help you, right? So that was my takeaway on the story about dumbing it down, right? Helping people understand.
Yeah. For this next one, I'm going to take a little bit more of a business lens. So you have to be able to control the company's destiny. So what do I mean by that? GE had air conditioning as one of their business units. And how it worked is they would sell the unit to a local supply store who would then have their guys go and install it. So when their guys went out in the field and installed it, if they did a poor job, the people whose house they installed it at will see the poor job, see the GE logo, associate that poor job with GE, and just ruin the reputation. So you have to be able to control the company's destiny. And a cardinal rule of business he mentioned is never allow anyone to get between you and your customers or your suppliers. I thought that was huge in terms of from a business lens.
Yeah, he goes on to even go as far as they are too hard to acquire and they're too valuable to lose. It's almost like an A player in an organization, right? Don't have somebody separate you from your revenue and from the people who give you the supplies in order to create revenue. They're too important. You can't afford to lose them.
Yeah, awesome. And I'll touch on one more point here before we move into our favorite quotes of the week. I loved the idea of stretch, taking on the stretch mindset. The first part of this is Jack loved to take young people and put them in stretch roles. So what he was doing there was allowing them to get more experience faster than they ever thought could imagine. And what this will do would push them to achieve things that they never thought they could achieve early in their careers. So that just sets them off on like an exponential curve. And taking on that stretch mindset, I think, is tremendous in terms of your career aspirations, your personal goals, etc.
Yeah. Going right into my quotes, obviously Landon took my first one. Learning from the very first episode, when I wasn't sure if we were supposed to have one or two quotes, I just went ahead and put two this time. So that being said, with Landon taking the first one I had, we'll go right into the second one. Change doesn't come from a slogan or a speech. It happens when you put the right people in place to make it happen, right? It's all about that foundation. That we talked about it in 0 to 1. We kind of grew the concept and how to win friends and influence people. And like I said before, Jack, he watered the seed, and now we're a beanstalk. That I love that quote. That's all I'll say about that.
It's before I get into mine, it's amazing to see the connections from book to book and back again. And I think that'll continue the farther we go on, and I'm kind of excited to see how that pans out.
It's like brilliant thinking is essentially the same regardless of who's it coming from, right? The concepts are the same. Everybody has their own little twist on how they go about viewing it and talking about it and implementing it.
That's a great way to put it. For my quote, I have something Jack talked about, the integrity of his people. Jack was huge on integrity. That's something he lived by. There wasn't two agendas in his life at all. He only had one, and that was integrity. So the quote goes, "They see no conflict between taking on the world's best every day, all over the globe, giving 110% and more to compete and win and grow, and at the same time maintaining an instinctive, unbendable commitment to absolute integrity in everything we do." I think that just encompasses everything that Jack Welch is about, and everything that he lived for and strived to do at GE is in that quote. And I love the 110% saying, because that was something that was instilled in me growing up. So yeah, it's just a perfect quote to remind yourself of and live by.
Yeah, absolutely. Going into what we want to implement for this week, from what we just read, repeatedly, Jack made the comment that he wishes he could have made decisions quicker. He felt like it would have been more profitable for the business and himself if he could have just made the decisions quicker. And so for me, I really want to try and make a decision quicker, regardless of the magnitude of the decision. I just want to have really work on myself and being able to make a yes or no decision within the first 30 seconds to a minute.
Yeah, and there's something called the 40-70 rule. You should never make a decision with less than 40% of the information available, because then you're essentially just guessing. But at the same time, you should never wait until you have over 70% of the information, because at that point, you're just stalling to make the decision. So going forward here, Chris, do you have specific examples of how you're going to speed your decisions up, or is that something that we will have to stay tuned to next week to kind of?
Well, obviously, I don't want to kind of ruin what I had in mind. I really just want to try to use it in general, right? If someone asks me a question, if I don't know it, I'm going to tell them I don't know, right? I'm not going to pit around the answer. Just flat out say I don't know. And if I do know, I'm going to tell them, right? It's just about making that quick decision to either say I don't know or here's the answer. That's going to be my approach to it.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'll get into mine here. So mine was kind of taking on that stretch mindset and really trying to develop that self-confidence aspect. So what I was going to do is try to dramatize my ideas by where I'm currently working. We run a weekly meeting, and at this meeting, it's really encompassing all the work I'm doing, but I'm not really presenting that work per se. So what I'm gonna plan on doing next week for our weekly stand up is I'm going to take charge of that meeting almost and try to elaborate on my ideas and explain my concepts for why I'm doing those ideas, to see if I can spark a little enthusiasm and just get more feedback.
And build that culture. Bring the excitement, bring the energy, right? By you doing that, people are gonna be stunned, just because you have the initiative, right? You have the courage. You're willing to put it all out there and say, I'm doing this because of this. And I think that's a great implementation for you, especially for you.
Thank you. Heck yeah. Well, that is all for this week's episode of Jack Welch's Straight from the Gut autobiography. Thank you all for tuning in. We appreciate you very much for listening and giving us support. And please leave suggestions, feedback, wherever you find us. Chris, you want to plug our?
So yeah, follow us on our social medias. Bound to improve on literally everything. We really we like the idea of being able to put this stuff out for people to see, but that's not really our main focus. Our main focus is being able to go back and look on the things that we had learned from each book and how we implement it into our future lives. And so with that being said, it's really like a win-win situation. Not only are we able to read and gain knowledge from these great authors, these great businessmen, but we're also growing as people.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you all again, and we'll see you next week.